And we have the perfect music as we get into our first topic for today, which is the insanity, the pure ludicrousness of WB Games. How is it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is DeMarco, and let's switch over here to this screen. Welcome to episode 7 of the Push Start podcast, and we have had a busy week indeed. Welcome, Storm Mage. It is good to see you. I remember how upset you were when Microsoft closed Force Studios, Xbox closed Force Studios. How are you feeling about WB's closures? Well, we're going to definitely be getting into that, but the spoiler is I'm not as surprised by what I saw with those closures. I'm not as surprised. Am I upset? 1000%. Do I think that WB Games had some absolutely absurd leadership decisions that have doomed incredible studios? 110%. Do I think that WB Games absolutely is going through some growing pains? Also, yes. So we'll dive into that a little bit more. For now, let's get something a little bit more calming, shall we? We'll put this on right here. Perfect. So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Hello, that blue number. Hello, Governor. How's it going? Welcome. So, as always, I like to start off these shows with just sort of, as people start to come in, as people waltz their way and they get into hanging out, I like to start off with just some simple, lighter topics, right? To ease into the show. I think making a game with Wonder Woman was a stretch anyway. I'm not so sure. We're going to dive into why. In just a little bit. But for now, just a couple things I really wanted to dive into very quickly. One is I wanted to say congrats to the team at Obsidian and Avowed. Carrie Patel recently stepped out and said that, hey, Avowed is being received very well and we're considering it a success. Both Obsidian as well as Microsoft proper are considering it to be a successful release, which is really nice to see. I'm glad that Avowed is getting that recognition. A lot of people really enjoying it, myself included. I enjoyed the time that I did spend with it. I do have to dive into it more before I give any final opinions whatsoever. But there you go. That was really nice to see. Also, if you're looking into VR, I know that I am a big proponent for VR, and not everybody is, but two VR stories, actually. Two smaller things that happened this week. One, the PSVR 2, the paperweight that it is, if we're being completely honest, that's actually discounted now by $200. It's had $200 price reduction. So that's pretty neat. If you're looking to pick one up, it's now $400, although Sony's not really doing a very good job supporting it with the first party releases. And of course, if you're going to buy a PlayStation VR, that's probably why. Versus if you're getting a HTC Vive or a Valve Index or any of the other PC-focused hardware, then you have a little bit more flexibility as to the titles that you're going to try out in VR. So there you go. And last but not least, also in VR news, the other one was that apparently later this year we're going to be getting a new Valve VR headset that basically the goal is to be an all-in-one PC machine. It wants to work like a Steam Deck but be playable in VR. So that way any games that are playable through Steam Deck, now instead of playing on your tiny screen, now you play on a big screen. Because obviously if you've ever experienced VR, you know that it feels, you could simulate anything. You could simulate the feeling of being in a movie theater. I remember I used to play, actually, no, it's not here, but I have the Samsung VR, the Gear VR for the old Samsung phones. In fact, I have my old Samsung phone right over here, completely and utterly covered in dust. If we just whoosh, right, you could see just how much, because I don't use it, but I have it because I had the Samsung Gear VR, and this is an S7, by the way, but I had the Gear VR, and that was really fun because I remember they had you could watch movies. You could watch movies, or you could watch like Netflix, but it made it look like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids style. So you were watching on a gigantic phone screen, and then you were like basically sitting on this log, and there's like a big soda can and like a bottle cap, and so you felt really tiny watching on the in the lawn. It was really, really cool that you could do that in VR, but it felt believable, which was the neat part. So basically the goal of this Valve VR headset, $1,200 is the rumored price point, which is very, very steep indeed. But if it operates like a full PC, plus you get the VR experience, I could see how some would justify that, especially because the goal of it, as I was saying, was to make sure that you can utilize, if it's Steam Deck compatible, now you can play it on your Valve VR headset, but you'll be able to play it on this big, massive screen that you get when you're in VR. So, honestly, I could see some value for some people there. It seems pretty cool. The Elemental... It's the two... You know what it is? It's the two thes. It's the two thes that always... They mix me up. The Elemental Hero, the Shadow Link, Dragon Wolf King... I don't know with Avowed, after seeing the problem with NPCs, the VFX, and other things, basically a wait for a sale in this game. And I completely understand why some people would think it's a wait for a sale. I don't think Avowed is going to be for everybody. The same way, for example, I think, like, Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, right? It's a fine game. It's good. If you have Game Pass, absolutely pick up Avowed. If you don't have Game Pass, wait for a sale. That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. And if you look at sort of where the Metacritic scores are falling, I think it's around 80, 81, which, in my opinion, 80 and 81 is still a very good score. In fact, recently on the Renegade Realm podcast, which you can check out, we were talking about how a lot of titles were sort of misrepresented or just undeserving of low Metacritic scores, even though they were phenomenal. I brought up, I think, Arkham Origins is one of them, which is a really great game. And so, yeah, but I understand why if something's falling into that 80, 81, 82 range, that it really is going to be a bit of a mixed bag. It's going to float between, hey, this crowd of people is going to wait for the sale, this crowd of people is never going to play it, and this crowd of people is going to absolutely love it, their favorite game of all time. Think of Fallout 76. Right? That might be a weird example for some, but a lot of people love that game. A lot of people still playing that game. Level 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 plus. It's crazy, but good for those folks, honestly. Yeah, I know you had that, Holly, and it's a beautiful paperweight for the PSVR 2. I would enjoy VR a lot more if the headsets weren't so heavy. A few years, maybe? Maybe. I mean, we already have sort of the mixed reality with the glasses, so that technology is shrinking, which is pretty neat. The problem is studios are having an issue where you need to have separate hardware. The only one that's been able to do it is the MetaQuest, where they sort of, you can just buy a MetaQuest for a really low price, but of course Meta is hemorrhaging money, which I've talked about multiple times. Hello, Slowlark. Hey, party people. How are we doing? Hope we're all good. I'm good. Are you good? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the show, episode 7. It's crazy. It's already been 7 episodes. And I skipped one because I'm not counting the last episode. So technically we have had 8 consecutive streams. It's pretty good. I'm proud of that. Very proud of that. Jeremy, hey! Good to see you, Jeremy. Lucky number 7, baby. Lucky number 7. Thank you. Yeah, that's true. Lucky number 7, and we have 2 really good topics to dive into today. Well, I'm lucky number 7 that even though it's not like necessarily good news, I get to talk about Elder Scrolls. That's pretty lucky to me. Any day that I have an excuse to talk about the Elder Scrolls, that is a good day for me, if I'm being honest. And absolutely, we're going to be diving into the Elder Scrolls leaks that came out after we get through some news about WB Games. Or am I doing that first? No, let's do it. We're going to switch the order of this. I have it in a different order when I was prepping the show. We're going to swap the order of this, though. Which means my little title cards aren't going to work. So, there you go. Hey, Jeremy, I hope you've been doing well, Jeremy. It's good to see you. That is a B grade, absolutely. But, hey, look, some people are fine passing with a B. Some people don't want to pass with a B. Some people want that A. So, again, it really fits beautifully in that middle spot right there, doesn't it? So, anyway, congrats to Avowed. If they're finding success and the studio's happy, Microsoft is happy, then I'm happy. Oh, other little small story too is Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. If you've been playing that, I haven't gotten into it yet, but I have dabbled with Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 because I really want to finish that first. And what I can say is that Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is getting mod tools starting on March 11th, which is very exciting, especially for the popularity that that game has. And then, of course, it is done in CryEngine? It's CryEngine. It's done in the CryEngine, I believe. So, I look forward to that because the CryEngine is actually, in my opinion, very, very underrated. I don't think it's used for enough projects. Of course, Crysis ran in that, which we all know the famous Can It Run Crysis. But I think a lot of people are actually subtly getting tired of Unreal. Not that Unreal isn't a great engine, but there are a lot of things that those who play a lot of games are able to sort of pick apart and see is consistent between a lot of titles in just sometimes the way they feel. So, of course, certain features in them too. Like, I think I saw something recently where it said every time it's compiling shaders, that's because you're probably on Unreal and it needs to do that in order to not have your game explode. So there you go. Engines are, of course, always a big conversation point because we get into things such as the Red Engine, which of course is now dissolved. They're not using that anymore. The CryEngine, and what I was thinking of naturally is the Creation Engine 2.0. I wish Oblivion remake would be confirmed. They're playing with my heart. I know, Storm Mage. I know. But on the bright side, if you have a PC, I hope you do, because then you'll be able to experience Sky Oblivion, which is releasing this year, actually. Super exciting stuff. And honestly, in a lot of ways, I can imagine that Sky Oblivion is going to be better than an official remake. Strictly because, yes, it's going to be using Skyrim's combat and all that stuff, but what I will say is this is done by fans for fans entirely, 100% of the way, versus an Oblivion remake, which is being handled by another studio. Of course, there's still fans. They're doing it for profit, naturally. So, when I see, for example, hey, we'll get a fancy, flashy new combat system in an Elder Scrolls Oblivion remake, that doesn't excite me as much as being able to explore all the different locations, because of course, why do people still play Skyrim? It's not for the combat, I can guarantee you that, it's for the world. And so when you have a group of mod makers that are putting all this time, energy, and investment into making the world feel beautiful, the world feel alive and creative and exciting to explore, and like you're going through it for the first time, that gets me way more excited. Way more excited. Personally, than having flashy combat, than having brand new visuals, right? Any of that stuff. It dives into a little bit of the conversation of when people say Bethesda needs a new engine. Not getting into this topic necessarily today, but what I will say is one of my first questions to ask people when they say Bethesda they need to move on from the Creation Engine. They need to move on. One of the first things I always sort of jump to is, well, do you like playing Skyrim? And do you like playing Oblivion? And did you like Fallout 3? Maybe Fallout 4? Those were all Creation Engine. So maybe it's not a problem with the engine. Maybe it's just a problem with the things around the game. Food for thought. Alright, let's get into our first topic here. Again, my things are out of order, but WB Games. Warner Brothers Games has officially... Oh, and thank you all so much for being here tonight. It's a pleasure, absolutely, to have you hanging out with me on this Thursday night. And what I will say is, please do. I never really ask for this. I never really ask for this during my streams. I don't turn on, like, the mid-roll ads on my streams or any of that nonsense. I don't even have channel memberships on. So, if you could just do me the favor of liking the stream. That is very much appreciated. And staying active in chat. The two most important things. Hang out, chat, let me know your thoughts on anything. anything and everything. The weather, how your day is going, your favorite flavor of ice cream, your favorite color, your favorite title that you're looking forward to in 2025. I don't care what it is, but hang out with me in chat. And also, please do like the stream. It really does help a lot. Never ask for that stuff. So, without further ado, Tay! It's good to see you, Tay. I love seeing Tay. I have to say, I know I don't interact with him a lot, but I do always see on Twitter all of your interaction. I love seeing your takes on things. Love seeing your take on a lot of stuff. A week from Split Fiction. That's true. I don't have someone to play that with, though. So, I will be happily enjoying yourself and Red playing that game. If you guys are interested in seeing Split Fiction and you are a fan of the Renegade Realm podcast, keep in mind that Holly, that blue number, as well as Red Wolf Renegade will be jumping into that. But it's good to see you here, Tay. Thank you so much for stopping by. So first and foremost, the WB studio closures. I saw a lot of outrage online. I saw a lot of outrage in YouTube videos. And when I see this type of when I see this, I'll get to your comment in a little bit, Slowlark. I will not ignore that. But
I'm Philomena, founder of Kin Apparel.
Whoa, okay, that was an advertisement that we don't want. All right. Sometimes when I have the background music on, I get surprised when an ad jumps up because I don't have premium. Because I'm poor. So I saw a lot of outrage about it because ultimately what it comes down to is ridiculously piss poor management. Horribly piss poor management from WB Games proper. What I'll also say is I have a slightly different opinion on the matter, which is I'm not entirely surprised by some of this news. And it would be probably easier for me to jump in here and start yelling and screaming and banging my fists about how terrible WB Games is and how evil these corporations are. But I don't know enough about the inside situation here. I don't know. We do know that, for example, Wonder Woman pivoted design, right? So Monolith Games explicitly stated that they did not want to do another Lord of the Rings game. Okay, fine. They got put onto Wonder Woman, or they chose to do Wonder Woman. And in, I believe it was 2023, yes, the game started development in 2021. Then in 2023, the game pivoted. So at first it was supposed to be really heavily utilizing the Nemesis system, which of course, this is one of the biggest, if I'm going to get mad at something, it's going to be the fact that it is disgusting to me. WB Games patented the Nemesis system, which in and of itself, like Lord of the Rings, the Shadow of War games, Shadow of Mordor, great games. I really like both of them. I went back and played Shadow of War somewhat, or Shadow of Mordor somewhat recently because I wanted to go through both of them. Didn't finish, but I really love those games. I thought the story was a lot of fun. I thought the characters were really cool, and I thought, of course, the Nemesis system was freaking awesome. But those games borrow so many elements from other titles. So many. They're stealing from, you have the towers like Assassin's Creed, some open world elements like other games, right? These titles are not in and of themselves original. They're borrowing the combat system from it's really kind of, it flies into their own free flow system. So that one, I'll give them the combat system, but Lord of the Rings Shadow of War, Lord of the Rings Shadow of Mordor in and of itself was not an 100% unique game. It borrowed from other studios, and then they said, hey, this unique mechanic that we built our game on that used other games' mechanics, you can't use this one. This one's ours. And now the studio shut down, and they have the patent rights until 2036. So until 2036, no other studio is allowed to use the Nemesis system or its likeness, which is just a massive disappointment because now the studio that was going to be working with it is gone. Games improve by innovating on systems. When you take a look at, for example, Star Wars Jedi Survivor and how that switched up some of the Souls formula to make it more accessible for a lot of players because, of course, it's a Star Wars game. It needed to be accessible to a wider audience. When you see that you could take that Souls combat system and bring it into a dark fantasy Pinocchio skin of it. This is all because games can innovate. When you take a look at what Starfield did with its ship combat, that borrowed from FTL, a small little indie game that's a really good indie game, but it borrowed from the small little indie game to make their combat system for space, for the space portion of it. Games need to innovate on each other, and that's how they grow, and that's how they get unique ideas, and locking systems behind a patent copyright is just really disappointing to see. And now, of course, it's locked by a studio that is never going to actually get to utilize it, and it's locked for the next 11 years. So shame on WB for that one. If I were them, I would look into ways to release that patent, personally. They're not going to, but I absolutely 1000% would look at ways to let other developers and other studios do something similar. So Wonder Woman began production in 2021. It pivoted. It was supposed to be utilizing the Nemesis system, but it was going to reverse the Nemesis system, where instead of the enemies sort of coming back at you the way they did in Shadow of War. Hey, Chris, how is it going? Welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. Happy Thursday. I hope you're doing well. Solark said, I don't know about the rest of the year, but I'm really looking forward to Atomfall. Atomfall, I was very excited for. And then, similar to Gopher, I don't know what stream he was talking about this in. I think it was when he was playing Civ 7. But he mentioned how Atomfall, the latest footage I've been seeing, really, it didn't do anything for me. I don't know if it was because it was kind of more what he said, which was that it was more survival-y looking. And I like survival games, but I thought it would really just be sort of this more like Stalker, which has survival elements to it, but I really like Stalker 2. And then when I look at Atomfall, like, I kind of, I don't know what it is about it. I was very excited for that one too. The combat also just looked a little bit clunky. It's like, it was a little bit, seeing more of Atomfall was a little bit like when I saw more of, what title was it? The one that was meant to be Weird Song? Is it Weird Song? That's being made by the former Bethesda developers. They're trying to make basically like Daggerfall, but for the modern age. And then they recently showed off combat for it, and I went, ooh, yikes. Really didn't do much for me. And so that was sort of how I felt with Atomfall 2. Maybe they'll surprise me. There's a clear trend with there's a clear trend with studios downsizing. But I don't know, that's a whole other discussion, right, Stormage? A whole other discussion can be had about studios shrinking down, studios condensing. They're trimming out the fat. They're trimming out a lot of the middle management. And I'm not saying that I'm advocating for layoffs. Nobody wants to see people get laid off from their jobs. But when it hinders a studio's ability to make a good game, because of course we saw, like, Obsidian made a phenomenal product with Grounded. Small team. They made a phenomenal product with Pentiment. Small team. We're seeing indie games doing absolutely incredible right now. The amount, like, look at, for example, Lone Vault Wanderer is working on Mouse PI for Hire, which is that sort of 1900s cartoon style, like original Mickey Mouse style cartoon hand-drawn first-person shooter, and it looks phenomenal. And that is one of the most exciting things about gaming right now, is what all of these other studios are doing and all these unique takes. That's how we got, for example, what is it? We had, I always like to talk about, I talked about it last week. Wildermyth. I played one recently called, let me see if I can't find this one. It was Road Warden, Balatro, which was nominated for Game of the Year. Plenty of interesting. Oh, technically Sons of the Forest, if you want a cool survival game. I really do enjoy Sons of the Forest. So a lot more really exciting things. that can come from indie studios, and we're sort of seeing that rise. But at AAA studio, Skyrim was made by a 100-man team. I'll always use that as sort of my go-to example. The nail in the coffin was really when management left. They left to create a new studio and work with EA. As soon as your talent, it's pretty much any studio. Hi-Fi Rush. Yeah, that is why. Tay, you're absolutely correct. That's why Hi-Fi Rush. One of the reasons why they closed down Hi-Fi Rush, right? They mentioned that the talent just wasn't there. That used to be there. That was another area too when it comes to WB closing down their studios. Another big problem with it was that the studio that made Shadow of War, the studio that made Shadow of Mordor, those members weren't there. You had I always forget it. The name of the ship, right? When you replace all the planks on a ship, is it still the same ship? Theseus? Ship of Theseus, is that? So yeah, no, the talent had moved on. It's the same concerns that we expressed with Dragon Age and BioWare and now the next Mass Effect game, right? It's the same exact concern that we have for that. It's the same concern going into Elder Scrolls 6, which is to say a lot of talent from the Elder Scrolls games are no longer there. And so are we going to be able to get a product that we're hoping for? Shrug. Should we be nervous? Probably a little bit. Probably a little bit. The problem with management thought it would be to people within the studios that aren't higher up. The problem is people don't know DC lore and story of Wonder Woman. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you could. It is a problem with management, right? Because ultimately, part of the reason why Wonder Woman in particular and Monolith got canceled was because it was impacted by the horrible year that WB Games experienced. Because the only successful launch that WB Games had recently was Hogwarts Legacy. I don't even know if technically Mortal Kombat 1 was a big financial success for them. So Wonder Woman absolutely in the closure. They might have had more time to release Wonder Woman. They might have said, "Hey, all right, let's get this game out the door from Monolith. Let's finish this title. You guys are working on it. You have a clear, I would hope, a clear direction after they pivoted design. So let's get that game out the door." But Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League lost $200 million for the studio. It was a massive commercial flop. It was horrible, and I suspect that the number is actually higher than that too. So when you have new leadership with James Gunn sort of stepping in, and he is assisting with the games division, and of course he, as far as I know, he wants to have a coherent universe between his games, films, and everything else. But sometimes he says that, sometimes he doesn't. James Gunn kind of just changes his mind or changes his own rules quite frequently. So when you have a $200 million loss, and then Hogwarts Harry Potter Quidditch also was not financially successful for the studio, released with a premium price, but then it really should have probably been. That's an example of a game that probably should have been free to play, and so I think that also lost money for the studio too, and so ultimately those impacted the decision of what they were going to do with Monolith. Let's see. I'm absolutely not excited. Oh, yeah, I'm absolutely not excited for any games right now. I want the Days BG1, original NWN, Metal Gear Solid Tenchu. I haven't had as much fun since. Yeah, hey, cool. How's it going? Welcome. Thank you for stopping by. It's good to see you. Basically, Steamboat Mickey. Yeah, yeah, Elemental. Yeah. It's sorry, getting a little bit distracted. I would love to see titles, some titles are able to bring that feeling back for me. For example, Warhammer Space Marine 2 was a great example of that, Chris, where I really did feel, same with playing Helldivers. I know Helldivers felt repetitive, but it did really make me feel like I was a bit younger. It brought back some of the youthful side of me that I got excited for, that I was really eager to jump into those games. So they're still here and there, but I will say they are farther and fewer between. And I think part of the reason is because these studios, we've talked about it before, other channels have talked about it before, that these games, these studios are just so massive that they need to remain conservative with their ideas. So something like a Space Marine 2 is a risk, and a lot of studios don't want to take that risk. Same when we look at, for example, WB's strategy going forward for their games is fewer releases with higher budgets and higher production value, which is just one of the dumbest ideas possible when you're seeing a rise because what that means is conservative games. It means it's going to be conservative, safe releases that meet wide audiences that end up being, well, guess what? Not that great. And we see that time and time again. I think that's why Starfield didn't do as well as it could have. I think that's why Dragon Age: The Veilguard, among other reasons, didn't do as well as it could have. I think that's why, for example, Elder Scrolls 6 I'm a little bit nervous for, because it does have this massive budget. So there is a horrible business strategy for WB Games going forward. And it would make a lot more sense for them, especially among the midst of all of these rising indie studios that are taking risks, that players are gravitating more towards, some without even realizing it, because a lot of them are falling into that AA space, that AA range there. So, really horrible decision making on that end. I don't know how I got onto that rant. I don't know what started me there. I hope many of the devs from all the closed studios come together to create their own company, call it something like Revived Games or Resurrection Studios, and save gaming. Storm Age is a happy thought. There's two types of people. There's going to be people who want to be at a nice bigger company where I mean, right now it's not safe, but part of a larger team. And there's other people, like, think of a Will Shen, that want to be part of that smaller, more ambitious, but also more limited, more scrappy team of people getting together. So, I would love Resurrection Studios. That's actually a pretty good one. Someone take that up. I know that there's no developers watching here, but if there were, Resurrection Studios would be pretty cool. Problem is, too, when we get these new studios, of course they can't work with any of these franchises, and they don't probably want to make the types of games they were making. So as wonderful as it is to think about, like, hey, a bunch of former BioWare devs, well, actually I say that, but then Exodus is a thing. So I was gonna say a bunch of studios, people coming together to make a game that was similar to what they were doing. Same with Callisto Protocol, even though that was a spiritual successor. So I take that last part back. Yeah, no, that would be awesome. I think Resurrection Games would be sick. Licensing out the Nemesis system would net WB Games so much cash. It would, yeah. But I don't know if studios are going to want to, because of course, the Nemesis system, as cool as it is, you still need to design all of that AI just because they're allowed to use the mechanic, the idea, right? That's what's patented, is the idea of the Nemesis system. So just because they can doesn't mean they want to spend the time and development resources to make that, especially when they have to pay for the licensing fee to use it. But I would love to see that. I would love to see WB Games get to license out some of these franchises, because of course their focus is now going to be exclusively Batman, Game of Thrones, Mortal Kombat, and I'm missing one. Batman, Game of Thrones, Mortal Kombat, Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings. How could I forget Lord of the Rings? Jonas would be ashamed if you were here. And then, of course, they have so many IPs, too, that's worth working through. They have so many IPs that are worth visiting. I mean, you think about all of the characters that they were... And I know Maddie brought this up in his video where he talked about the situation. But you think about all of the characters that Harry Potter. Thank you, Jesus. Harry Potter, because of Hogwarts Legacy. That was the other one. There were 5. Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, Hogwarts Legacy. Thank you, Slow Lark. See, that's why I need you guys here. Harry Potter. Yeah, and of course we know that Avalanche is working on basically Hogwarts Legacy 2 at this point. So they're full on active development on that project. Or pre-production, maybe still, but they moved right on from one to the next one. So yeah, but you have so many interesting characters that they were able to pull from multiverses, which multiverses in and of itself another financial loss, but was just a horrible decision where they released the game and then pulled it back for a very long time and then re-released it, but re-released it worse. That was probably the dumbest possible move they could have ever done. I don't know whose decision that was, especially when the game was doing really well and was pretty popular. It would have been much smarter to have a cadence of content, but they basically committed suicide with that game, or they just really killed it off with that decision. I think Wonder Woman was a risk from the beginning. There are tons of other characters they could have spent so much money on. Yes and no. I mean, look, at the end of the day, yes, it's Monolith, so it's not Rocksteady, but I think WB Games, again, maybe you could blame corporate leadership, right? Corporate leadership wants to focus on what they think the most popular characters are. That's why Rocksteady is back to working on another Batman game. There's tons of people that say, man, I would love to see I don't know who's saying I want to see a Green Lantern game, but I'm sure there's people, let's do a Green Lantern, let's do a Superman game. Let's have a good Superman game. So yes, there's other characters they can pull from. I think doing a Superman game is actually harder than a lot of people think. However, Wonder Woman could have worked, especially because the combat system, basically when they pivoted game design, the combat system was going from sort of this Nemesis system style experience to it became like a more linear God of War inspired title, and I think that actually could have really worked for a Wonder Woman game. I think it could have really worked, if I'm being honest. And I think Wonder Woman's a cool character. That maybe I'm in the minority on that one, but especially the way she was represented after Suicide Squad killed the Justice League. Whew. Excuse me. Especially after Suicide Squad killed the Justice League, I think that there were a lot of things wrong with that game, but Wonder Woman, well, how her character was handled was one of them, but Wonder Woman as a character in that game was not one of those problems. I thought she was actually written really well. Of course, 2 completely different studios, Rocksteady versus Monolith, right? We understand that, but I would trust Monolith to make a good character for Wonder Woman because they did a great job with Talion. And they did a great job with Celebrimbor in the Shadow of Mordor games, or the Shadow of games. You had people that were hired to work on Wonder Woman. These people don't understand the DC lore that fans have. This is why WB Games should have had the original creators. That's part of why the Arkham games work so well. I think they had people who worked on like the animated series and who wrote the comics help out with the original games in the Arkham franchise. 100%, you do need that. We don't know how involved they might have been though. We don't know how involved those people would have been. But I do understand the concerns. I think that there's two things. I also don't like the idea of assuming that the people working on Wonder Woman were not big Wonder Woman fans. I think that's a pretty big leap to make, Shadow, just because maybe not all of them were. I don't think everyone who worked at Machine Games on Indiana Jones was a big fan of Indiana Jones, right? That's just part of being on a development studio. That's for a major franchise, or that works with major franchise and major IPs. So I don't know if that would have been, we don't actually know the full involvement. From what we do understand, there has been some inside information that came out that said the team that was working on it was very passionate and very excited about it. Of course, they're going to say that, but I'm inclined to believe them because, you know, working with these major DC characters is a big deal. Probably why they are doing the Oblivion remake so that they can see who they need to hire. I missed that comment, Jeremy. That's a bit out of context at this point. James Scattergun. A little bit, yeah. James is... I know a lot of people don't like James Gunn. I actually kind of like James Gunn. I think he's funny. Not like his movie... Not all of his movies are like, haha funny, but I do think just him as a person is funny. When he sits down and he talks about sort of continuity and lore and consistency in everything and what's canon and what's not canon. And he sort of just is giving an interview where he goes, it's just what does it matter? Like, you care too much about this stuff. It's basically what his take is. He's like, it's insane. and I'm inclined to agree. Like, yeah, you need to have a level of continuity, but like if this thing doesn't perfectly match up with all these other things, and people on the internet lose their minds. Speaking of people on the internet losing their minds, you could look, like there was a small teaser for Shrek 5. And my God, the internet was blowing up because they redesigned what Shrek looks like, even though like he's 40 years older. And people are losing their, like, I say losing their collective minds. There's some people that just absolutely freaked out. Some people freaking out because, what is it? Siri. They thought Siri. They did a CD Projekt Red did a bit of a behind the scenes look at the Witcher 4, or yeah, the Witcher 4 trailer. And people were like micro-analyzing it, to the point where CD Projekt Red had to make a statement, but people were saying, oh, they changed what Siri looks like because we backlashed against it too much. We won. We beat CD Projekt Red. And CD Projekt Red came out and said, no, it's just different lighting. So there you go. Shrek is a DEI. Yeah. And they're bringing in his DEI daughter into Shrek 5, and Donkey is gonna be into other he's gonna be into horses instead of other donkeys. And oh God, people, that's what I'm saying, people freak out about everything. Looney Tunes game would be cool, but I have no idea what that'd be like. Good question. How would they do a Looney Tunes game? I remember playing a classic Tom and Jerry game way back. I know that's not Looney Tunes, but it was like on a Nintendo DS, and then you would it was like a side scroller, or Nintendo DS. It might have been a Game Boy Advance game. Oh wait, was it? No. Was it like a Cartoon Net? It was. It was like a game on CartoonNetwork.com. Wow. And you would go around and you played as either Tom or Jerry. You could choose which one you wanted to do, and they both had their own, or was it a Game Boy game? I don't know. It's a very long time ago. But I imagine something. I also had a Looney Tunes game, too. I did have a Looney Tunes game on the Game Boy, which was a lot of fun. Very hard, for a little kid at least. I think a Looney Tunes, honestly, Multiverses was like a perfect Looney Tunes game, if I'm being brutally honest. You could probably do like a Looney Tunes kart racer if they really wanted to try that avenue. There might already be one for all I know. Superman is very easy because story lore has in the comics, cartoons, and movies. Easy to make easy to make a game about story-wise. Hard to make a game gameplay-wise that feels satisfying and fun. I think Superman would be a very difficult character to make a good game with. In fact, we've seen the attempts at Superman games. A lot of them aren't good. Some of the best Superman games aren't actually Superman games. Like, for example, Injustice. Right? But there you have Poison Ivy and Batman and Robin able to beat the crap out of Superman. So, there you go. And also, I know Superman fans aren't super fond of Injustice because they don't want evil Superman anymore. They want good Superman. James Gunn seems cool. I've got no skin in the game. Yeah, so like I completely understand that. At the end of the day, we have no idea what the Woman game was shaping up. Could have been heading to be a success, or it could have been boring. Either way, we'll never know. And that is exactly sort of where my take on it lands as well. It sounds cool conceptually. A lot of times games sound cool conceptually. When we talked about Starfield leading up to the release of Starfield, that was something where I constantly said, oh, having hundreds of planets to explore, oh, having ship combat in the game, that sounds cool conceptually. I don't know if Bethesda needs to put that in their game. When we talk about Elder Scrolls 6 in a little bit, we'll dive into that more. But I was very much of the side of, yeah, no, I don't think these studios need to make these decisions. I don't think that's exactly what the games need to do. And what is it? Where was I going with that? I love when that happens. Anyway, could have been good, could have been bad. Oh, conceptually, what we hear about Wonder Woman can sound fantastic. It could sound like one of the best games ever made. But that doesn't mean in practice that it actually is executed that well. And again, I would look to like Starfield with the ship mechanics. They were fine, but I don't think they needed to be there. The 1,000 planets sounds cool conceptually, but it really didn't add anything to the game. And a lot of people had problems with it, which I was worried about it from the get-go. Same with, what is it? Same with, there's another mechanic. But you get the idea. Suck it, nerds! Would love to. Would love to! Bring it here, so I can suck it. Bring it over. Come on. I don't think Wonder Woman was going to be executed well. The team didn't have experience to do with flight mechanics from a combat perspective. We don't know. I know that Wonder Woman can fly. We don't know if she was going to fly. Base building in Starfield. It was not. It was completely unnecessary in Starfield. Completely unnecessary in Starfield. They just did it because they feel like they need to. Because now it's such a locked-in thing, especially coming off of Fallout 76, Fallout 4. People love it. And it's a great system. It's a really cool system for Fallout. We don't need it in Elder Scrolls. We don't need it in Starfield. It's a cool... You just finished... We're getting to the end of our WB Games discussion. We're moving on to Bethesda and Elder Scrolls leaks in just a little bit. I'm excited to see what Donkey's kids are like all grown up. Yeah. Oh, we also, Arcane, we're talking about how people were freaking out about Shrek's redesigned look, even though he's 30 years older than he was. And also, Shrek came out in, what, 2005? And now it's 2025, so... Yeah. It does look weird. You think Shrek looks... Why does it look weird? It doesn't look weird. It looks completely normal to me. What is... Am I just blind? Am I blind that I can't see Shrek properly? With his ogre face? Like, I don't... I really don't understand it. It was fiddling. It wasn't that good. 2001 was the first. Yeah, so 2001. It's okay if Shrek changed a little bit since 2001. They could have, how do you make a character that's stronger than 99% and faster than 99% of the universe? That's why it's a challenge, right? And how do you make a game... I mean, they've done it before. I really enjoyed... If you haven't seen the anime My Adventures with Superman, actually really, really good. Very entertaining. My Adventures with Superman made me like Superman. I typically do not... I'm not a fan of Superman that much. I think he's boring. I just don't... I don't care for him as a character. My Adventures with Superman made me think differently. And of course, the ways you could do that. Well, he's weak to magic, right? Oh, you could have it where he's going up against super strong robots. And there's ways that you can bring his power down so that it's fair. But when you're playing a Superman game, I feel like... Have him fight other Kryptonians. I feel like part of the excitement of that is that power. But when you feel like in a game you could get beat up really, really easily because it needs to be a video game with some challenge to it. It's a hard balance to make, especially when you think about the scope, the scale, the size that it needs to be. You know, I think maybe they could have done like a Hulk Ultimate Destruction style thing with Superman. That might be pretty cool, but there you go. Wonder Woman had the invisible jet where she could use to fly. This is why people know the DC Universe years ago. This is also why we need the old creators who made Wonder Woman. I don't know what you mean by that exactly, Elemental Hero. Starfield, dope game with flaws. At 1,000 planets is okay. The problem was the execution, spreading things out too much. But how are you going to do a game like that when you have... How are you going to not spread things out that much? I guess you could argue that the idea would be to central on a core 5 or 6 worlds, and then everything else is just, you know, you're getting to procedural stuff if you go anywhere else. I bet the new Shrek looks weird because Shrek looks weird. Yeah, fair enough. They need to make him handsome. They need to make him attractive for modern audiences. Yeah, you would have to spread things out that much in that style of game, and that's why I think, generally speaking, I've never been a fan of these big open worlds. You know, I think there's certain games where it does work. No Man's Sky is a good example of that, but you know exactly what you're getting into with a No Man's Sky versus... part of the problem, I think, with Starfield was that it did have a lot of Bethesda players, like myself, that weren't really too crazy about it because we were hoping for one thing from Bethesda and we got another, which is fine, right? I'm not one of those people who's going to sit on camera and say that, well, the game was terrible because it didn't do what I want. But I am going, because it didn't do what I like about Bethesda games, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to critique that as far as reviewing it. I've had a few podcasts. You centralize the content on a couple planets, all the content, then all of them are barren, which is perfectly okay. You're still going to have, even with... See, I think, again, Tay, I think that sounds great, but you still are going to have a bit of an issue where even across those 6 planets, or 5 planets, or however many you do, things are still going to be really spread out. Really spread out. Just because you have 6 planets to fill. Especially if they're doing... Like, how... I don't know. I guess you could have designed a bunch of smaller maps would have been the goal. But I think even still, I'm just not confident. At the end of the day, I am not confident that if Starfield was 5 planets or 1,000 planets, as it is, if it were 5 planets, that they would have been able to make something that still provides that comprehensive, tight-knit, handcrafted feel. Because of simply the scope and scale that they were trying to achieve. So they could have done a bunch of smaller maps, but then it would have just felt unnatural, inorganic, and probably way too small. So I'm just not confident with the way they executed that they would have been able to pull it off. But I think there is something that... There's something there. There's an idea there, right? That could work. I'm not 100% sure... the best way to do it that would have led to the highest satisfaction among both new fans that would appreciate it and old fans alike, to find that balance. Yeah, sometimes, exactly. Yeah, Tay, sometimes you have good ideas, but they don't always work out mechanically, exactly. Yeah, that's the subject that we've been on. Red Mile and Neon on the same planet. Yeah, but you're still... So, yeah, Tay, but what I'm saying is you'll still have those probably pretty spread apart. So how are you developing everything in between, but across 5 planets? That's still... it's a lot more plausible than what they did, but it's still very stretched out, right? It's still incredible amounts of scale that they need to be able to fill in. And not just fill in, that needs to feel interesting. Because I think you could have very easily wound up in the exact same situation where the worlds felt empty and barren and boring and not fun to explore. You're not getting... It would have been very difficult to get, like, say, 5 Skyrim-sized worlds, is what I'm getting at. And of course, they could be more spread out for a game like Starfield. That would be perfectly okay. So you don't have as much going on. But just that sense of scale to make sure that the landscape is interesting... Interesting enough where you're not just teleporting and fast traveling back and forth because there's no reason to run through them. Which is a problem I have with most open world games. Hey, what about the in-between? It's not, you have three, great, you have three interesting locations, but I'm still not convinced you have the in-between that would still remain interesting across 5 different planets. But I understand. Again, I think it's one of those things, like, conceptually I can see how it could work. I just think when we bring into the equation game development timeline, scope, budget, and all those other things that are the reality of game development, I just don't know if it would have worked. Because a lot of people were saying the exact same thing with 1,000 Planets. People were saying, oh, well, Bethesda can do it. Like, they have the team is this much bigger, and they could blah, 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 and the budget's that much higher. But the reality is it doesn't work out that way. So there you go. We need to go back where they under-promise and over-deliver. We need to go back to where... I've said it before, but I think one of the biggest problems is that there's too much fan input. And there's too much fan input because the studios show games too much. I think we need to go back to when studios said, okay, here's the trailer. This is the game we're making. It's coming out. What Bethesda does, it's coming out in 5-6 months. But they're not showing it off until it's more ready. I also think that games need to be scaled back a lot, which is part of what studios are trying to achieve with cutting back budgets. My main concern now is actually the use of AI in games and whether or not storytelling, which has been a major problem for games, is going to continue to be a major problem. That is one of my biggest concerns because AI does not tell good stories. I'm sorry, it does not. It could give you ideas, but it does not do good writing, and we already have a problem with writing in a lot of titles. So there you go. Create several smaller games, expand your market. That's what I would rather see, and that's what worked best. And we know that they could do it in budget because they've already done it. So, Elder Scrolls 6 had some leaks recently. Pivoting a little bit. On base building and tests, I think it would be awesome, but maybe only 1 to 3 plots you get, one for being a lord. Let's dive into some Elder Scrolls 6. So, I'm not going to dive too far into the actual leaks themselves because they've already been discussed. So very quickly, basically, it said that they had, it's going to take place across High Rock and Hammerfell. There's going to be ship combat. You will have entire town building would be included in the game. Let's see what. You were going to have entire town building that was available, was part of the new features. Basically, a lot of it was things that are basically on a person's wish list, right? They are ideas of what folks have been hoping to see from it, right? And it's a hodgepodge of a bunch of different fans because I personally don't really want to see naval combat. In Elder Scrolls. I think it'd be cool. Again, it's another thing where I believe conceptually it sounds like it'd be sick, but I'd rather just get a good Elder Scrolls game. It was going to be seamless. There was going to be about like 12 major cities that you could explore across both Hammerfell and High Rock. Dragons were going to make a return, and of course, you would be managing fortresses and forts, which that does sound like a pretty cool thing to me, to be sort of a lord. Similar to, you think of the little mobile game that came out, Elder Scrolls Castles. If anybody played Elder Scrolls Castles, it was a cool concept. Your ruler actually got older, and you had to pick who the king was, and they could betray you. It had kind of like a Papers, Please, not a Papers, Please, a Reigns. If anybody knows the indie game Reigns, where you pick left or right and it changes, right? So, but then it was basically Fallout Shelter, Elder Scrolls theme. So, honestly, that got me excited with the idea of, or even if you think to Elder Scrolls Blades, which I know has completely mixed reaction, and understandably so, but you sort of had a couple points. You could customize the buildings and what goes in certain spots. I think that was a cool concept, personally. And I would love to see that for, if Elder Scrolls was going to do a settlement system of any kind, I think that's where I would personally prefer it to go, which is to say, here's a building. You could decide, is it going to be a blacksmith shop? Is it going to be an alchemy shop? Is it going to be this? And then, of course, you get to reap the benefits of that. But it's like, this building is here. You don't place the building down yourself and build it up yourself. I think that would be pretty neat, personally. However, this was revealed very quickly to be completely debunked. It actually came from something on Reddit or 4chan like 3 to 4 years ago. And it was really just wishful thinking. It was a 4chan post that somebody took down and basically reposted, and it resurfaced. So it was all a bunch of hokey. Now, that being said, why I wanted to bring this up in conversation at all is because I wanted to dive into some of the things I thought would be exciting and some of the things I believe Bethesda would be going in the wrong direction with. Now, this is a whole video that I probably will make at some point, because as Elder Scrolls starts to get closer, I think I'll really start to rally behind my channel confidently again. Similar to the way we led up to Starfield, right? Just because at that point, I'm very much getting involved in something I'm genuinely passionate about and I can get really excited behind. So, we'll see how that goes. But, absolutely we'll probably make a standalone video on this at some point. However, the first concern that I have, I want to go into my concerns and then the things that I like. My first concern is having both Hammerfell and High Rock. I think that this could be really cool, and in fact, I made videos ages and ages ago about why I thought that would be a pretty neat idea, especially given, lore-wise, the political climate that's going on after the events of Skyrim and sort of what's going on with the Thalmor. And the fact that Hammerfell is still fighting the Aldmeri Dominion, but High Rock, I think, is subjugated at that point. They're still part of the Empire. So you have a really interesting political dichotomy that's going on there. You, of course, have the tease that we got in Skyrim that it was going to be in Hammerfell. And Hammerfell and High Rock, you're also getting very diverse environments, especially with things like is it called the Dragontail Mountains in High Rock? The ones that border Skyrim? A lot of orcish areas and settlements that you'd be able to explore that I would love to dive more into, because I think the orcs are so fascinating. And of course, I also like the idea of High Rock just because it's sort of King Arthur high fantasy. So, would love to see both for several different reasons. But it does worry me because of the scale of the map. And we know that they relied heavily on procedural generation. This kind of goes into, Tay, what you're saying, right? You have 2 regions, 2 provinces to explore. You could argue that that's like 2 planets, and then how can they fill that up with interesting stuff? So, I absolutely think that there is potential, but I think back to what I enjoyed about Skyrim, and I did genuinely... Some people think Skyrim is too small. I really thought that Skyrim's size was pretty fun because you were constantly running across something new and something engaging. So as far as 2 provinces, I think personally I would rather, especially because you're dealing with a lot of lore differences between the 2, I'd rather them really hone in, focus in on, and flesh out one rather than having to flesh out both of those. That's just my take. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that one. And subsequently, naval gameplay. Naval gameplay is something that keeps coming up because it's tied to the speculation that both of these provinces will be accessible. And how are you going to get between the 2? Well, you sail there. You get on your own boat and you go between, and then you could get into pirate battles and ship battles and stuff like that. We've seen Bethesda introducing vehicles, which is why I honestly believe that these will be in the game, if I'm being brutally honest. We see Bethesda playing around with the rover in Starfield. Of course, we saw them with the ship mechanics in Starfield, so I do think that we're going to get ship mechanics also. However, what worries me is the time and investment that goes into that, which could be spent in other areas, whether it is making new dungeons, whether it is improving gameplay systems, whether it is adding more unique mechanics. If you've played Avowed at all, you've seen how, or if you've watched Avowed, you've seen how the combat is a lot more dynamic because you get abilities with your melee, right? You can have a sword and a shield, and you could shield back, you could charge, like you could ram them with that. And instead of just swinging your sword the way you do in Elder Scrolls games, Avowed tries to make it a lot more dynamic, whether you are casting spells or you're going sword and board, or you're using 2 daggers, you know, dual wielding daggers. So hey, Pickle Maniac, how's it going? Welcome. Thank you for stopping by. If you're still here, I'm sorry if I'm just really quite a bit late on that, but welcome. 1 town for me is fine, not 20 settlements. That's exactly it, right? 1 bigger town. Let me do 1 larger town. I don't think we'll talk about settlement system in a bit. So yeah, there's other mechanics that are more to the core of an Elder Scrolls experience that I think are much more important. And as cool as ship mechanics and going around and sailing on your boat would be, I think I'd rather that core experience that I know and I love about an Elder Scrolls game to be much more fleshed out and much more realized. But that's just my take. Again, I know something that a lot of people will probably disagree with, because new things, flashy things, bigger things, more things is what attracts a lot of people, a lot of gamers, to say, yeah, we could go sail a boat, that sounds sick, like we could go on pirate raids, that sounds sick. But I know from experience, speaking of Starfield, that doesn't always work out that way. Buildings taking time to build would be cool. If you come, you can see different phases of construction. Yeah, and it's actually what Sim Settlements did. If you've tried out Sim Settlements for Fallout 4, it was really freaking cool how that worked, because you just basically said, I want to put this building type here, and I'm going to assign this settler to it, and then you can build it any way you want. As long as I have the materials. I don't think you even need the materials, actually. I think that was part of it, is they can go out, so you don't need to find every single scrap of wood that you can get. So Sim Settlements already did it. I was hoping that Bethesda would borrow more for that from Starfield, and they absolutely did not. When we talk about settlements, I think it was a great thing for Fallout because it made sense that you were sort of rebuilding the wasteland, and that, of course, was one of the core themes about Fallout 4. That's why the colors were a lot brighter, right? A lot more, what's the word? Saturated in style versus Fallout 3. So I thought that it really fit the theme, but then they brought it into Fallout 76. Again, it made sense. They were rebuilding the wasteland, right? Truly rebuilding it, because you were supposed to be the first people out of the vault. Then they brought it into Starfield. Okay, still makes sense, but you could tell that they kind of just tacked it on because they felt like they had to. The settlement system could be something that really defines Fallout in particular as a franchise. I don't think it needs to be in every single Bethesda game now and forever just because it worked well in Fallout. Chris, I'll read your chats in just a little bit. I will get to those. But, was it going back to settlements? Yeah, I think what could work really well for settlements is, again, to go with like what Blades did. If you want to include a system, just make it a very light version of what you had before. And then work on other mechanics. Make it more about the actual leadership. Yes, you can rule over this town. Think of like a Helgen Reborn, right? Really cool mod, Helgen Reborn. You can rule over this town, but you really just, you don't have to put up every single building by yourself. Instead, it's more about making decisions for the town. It's more about what impacts the people, what factions that you let into your town. Do you want the Dark Brotherhood to have a presence? Do you want to work really hard to keep them out? What about the Thieves Guild? Do you want to have the Fighters Guild or no, right? All of these other elements. Do you have to rule over a court? Think of Dragon Age Inquisition, where prisoners would come in and you had to decide, are they going to get locked up? Are you going to exile them, right? All those sorts of really cool things. And how does that change? That could be the experience that's unique to Elder Scrolls versus, hey, let me put up this wall and this wall and this wall. I'm going to put down. And I guess you could say Starfield sort of did that because you were working a lot more with prefabs. But I don't know if it, I would be completely fine if they said, hey, this is, a building's going to go here. just pick the type of building you want. Is it residential? Is it a guild hall? Is it an alchemist, a blacksmith, so on and so forth? A very simple thing they could do in game would be to make it feel real. Tie the size of the kingdom to your level. The more you level up, the bigger your city changes and gets bigger. To your level, the more you level up. I don't know if leveling up, that is an interesting idea. I don't know if leveling up Chris makes the most sense solely because it would be more about like sort of if you want your size to get bigger, right? You would have to go out and conquer nearby territories, take over nearby forts, that sort of thing. So you could tie that to level because you're strong enough to do that. I would say that they could maybe tie it to sort of if people probably don't remember, Oblivion actually had I'd rather plop a sim building or do it like Fallout 4. I don't like the prefabs. Yeah, that's why I think, again, that's why I think I'd rather have just like, you can have a building here. It's going to be, here's some different styles, but you just really choose what type of building. Again, I think Blades is a great example of it. But people probably don't remember that Oblivion actually had an infamy and a fame system. If you did a lot of crimes, you got infamous. It was actually a really minor mechanic, but then you couldn't do things like pray to the gods. If you tried to pray at an altar and you had too much infamy, the gods would say, nope, you are a villainous person, we're not letting you. If you had fame, it let you take on certain quests. Certain quests would pop up based on what your fame was. So I could see that being tied, something similar there being tied to how your influence might spread over your leadership. That would be pretty cool. Say a faction is successful at levels 1 to 10, but then you get a quest where you form the Dark Brotherhood or are part of forming it. Yeah, that would tie into influence. It's sort of like what they already did with Skyrim, where after I think it was like level 10, then suddenly you get a letter from the Jarl of Falkreath saying, "Hey, I've taken, if you have Hearthfire DLC." He said, "Hey, I've taken notice," like, or maybe he does that without Hearthfire. Maybe he just does that to become Thane of Falkreath. I've always done it, and then it ties into Hearthfire, because of course then after you do that, you could buy land. But anyway, you reach a certain level, and then you get a letter from the courier, and that's sort of like on the same token of what you're talking about here. They also said that there's a more dynamic combat system inspired by modern RPGs, and they're shifting away from traditional class structures. Instead, character progression is more organic, evolving based on player actions, which we already had with Skyrim, right? You use a sword, you level up in sword. I like class systems. I wish they go back to class systems. I think they kind of started doing that with Starfield, and it was one of the higher praised things in Starfield, was having like the roles and the backgrounds and the feats and stuff of that nature. So, and you look at the success of Baldur's Gate 3, and classes are a good thing. I don't know why and when people started thinking that classes were not good, but they do. They help to make very different feeling characters. In my opinion, they help with role playing quite a bit. Of course, you could still do that with a dynamic, a more fluid level up system, the same way you had it in Skyrim. But I don't think classes are such a bad thing personally, especially if you get unique class bonuses, because then they tie it up more into the RPG side of things and the choice and consequence and how you can go and progress through quests and all that sort of stuff. So there you go. But the leaks were complete hokey. It's not the first time that we've gotten Elder Scrolls leaks. It's not going to be the last time that we've gotten Elder Scrolls leaks. And if you paid attention to this at all, then you would know that people jumped on this news. People like vultures sprinted, and it's going to be Elder Scrolls. Is a massive title, a huge name with tons of recognition. So my advice to all of you today that are here listening, thank you all for being here, by the way. My advice to all of you is, when you start seeing insiders posting and when you start seeing leaks come up, don't really pay them too much mind. Entertain the idea, humor them even, but just don't jump onto them. And keep an eye out for the content creators that really just jump immediately onto the news to try to get that first video out as soon as there's leaks. Just take note of that, because
By the gods, there is a psychopath on the loose.
by the gods, Chris Harris, thank you. As always, thank you for your time. As always, thank you for your ongoing support, Chris. Seriously, thank you so much. And I'm glad to have you here. You've been here like every single week, and it's always great. And I love seeing your insights too. I love seeing all your comments. I love seeing your ideas. You have a lot of really great ideas. Pog! Poggers, baby! No, thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate that a lot. And you're always supportive, and you're always here. And thank you to all of you that are hanging out too. I don't say it enough during my, or as much as some other people during my streams. But seriously, your generosity knows no bounds. And I'm so grateful. Like, honestly, I can't express it enough. Seriously, at some point in time, Chris, at some point in time, please, if there's a game that you are excited for or anticipating, please let me give it back. Because you have, not only have you been incredibly generous to the channel, but every time I do any kind of a giveaway, you always say, nah, take me out of it. So, if there is anything that I can, if there's a game you're excited for, let me know. Please let me give back at least a little bit to say thank you. Hello, King Styles. How's it going? Welcome. Welcome. But, what is it? Yeah, so pay attention to, I was saying pay attention to the content creators that do buy a Mass Effect. Chris, have you played Mass Effect? I actually don't know. Have you played the Mass Effect trilogy? Would you play the Mass Effect trilogy? You have. Okay. There you go. I thought so. I thought you would have. What are your thoughts on Mass Effect? Out of curiosity. Like, where would you rank it as far as you loved it? Alright. Cool. I'm just curious where you would rank it. Like, I'm just interested where you would rank it as far as, which makes sense, right? Because I know you're incredibly excited for Exodus, which I still need to tap into that audiobook. I haven't been driving a lot lately, so which is where I usually listen to an audiobook, so I haven't gotten into it. But I do have it. I owned it. I got it on Audible. It's ready. It's there. It's in my library, and it will be the next thing I listen to for sure. Because I'm probably going, I was listening to Lord of the Rings in audiobook because Andy Serkis is narrating it, but I'll probably read it just because Tolkien's writing is incredible and everybody should read the Lord of the Rings. He's one of the best writers of all time. So I'll probably read the physical version of that and then audiobook the Exodus short story, or the Exodus story instead. But yeah, keep an eye out for the content creators that are jumping on this news, that are jumping on top of leaks to try to get the first video out. They are, I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm sure that, you know, but I don't know. It spreads misinformation, and I'm not a fan of that. I'm not a fan of insiders. I'm not a fan of leaks too much. I don't like it. I think it takes a lot away from the developers. I think it takes a lot away from the excitement of the game, in my opinion. There's times where it can be exciting to speculate on some of these ideas. Like, it's fun to speculate. Is there going to be a ship mechanic? There can be no ship mechanic. It's fun to speculate. How's the combat going to work? How's the progression going to work? So it is to an extent, but I generally speaking, I'm not a fan of insiders because 60% of the time, they're all full of BS. So there you go. So if you don't like any BS, you don't want BS pie, you don't want BS pudding, keep it real, keep it tuned here. A little bit of a shameless plug there. Witcher 3 will always be one of my top games. AC Origins, love Odyssey. Mass Effect was really good too. I like the storyline. I didn't know that you liked Assassin's Creed that much. I should probably try I'm not going to. I'm just you know, I'm just gonna be honest. I'm not gonna play any of the new Assassin's Creed games. I'm sorry. I've been told to. I've been told to try them. I hope Tess gets wagons. Rather have that over a ship. Wagons that you can drive around, or wagons like in Dragon's Dogma 2? Because I really want to see, you know, I think what I would love to see from the next, again, this is a whole video, but I would love to see Elder Scrolls 6 borrow from 3 games. Avowed with its combat system. Both. Okay, fair enough. Avowed with its combat system. Dragon's Dogma 2 with its world, because I thought the world of Dragon's Dogma 2 was incredible. I liked the wagons a lot, which there was a mod for that. There was a mod for Skyrim that you could just sit in the wagon and do the whole ride. But of course, I think the way it was done in Dragon's Dogma, because it was intentional there, right? So it was done a lot better. But I would like to see them borrow from Dragon's Dogma, Avowed, and Baldur's Gate 3. The 3 if Elder Scrolls is, I would rather Elder Scrolls and Oblivion. The 4 games. Oblivion, Dragon's Dogma 2, Avowed, Baldur's Gate 3. And if that is if those are the titles that Elder Scrolls looks at instead of looking at Starfield, because I'm horribly worried when it comes to Elder Scrolls 6 that Bethesda is going to continue going down the direction they have been, which is, I can respect and appreciate that they're trying to do different things, but they're targeting the wrong things for what their audience knows and what their audience likes, and quite frankly, what I think even a wider gaming audience. They're doing, Bethesda is going for quantity over quality lately, and they're going for mass appeal. The reason why a game like Warhammer is successful, the reason why a game like Baldur's Gate 3 is successful, I stand by this, is because they are niche, because they're trying to do something that is very, very focused and very targeted, and your audience grows outwards from that. You find your core audience here, you focus in on that, and then that audience will then grow it outward because there is that much buzz and that much excitement around it. Exactly, Chris. You got it right there. You have it right there. And then the world, I would argue the world of a Bethesda game, because that is Bethesda's strongest point, is the worlds. It's the NPCs all having their own schedules. It's the in Skyrim, the way that every dungeon was unique and being able to explore all of these dungeons, because no studio has ever done dungeons the way that Bethesda has. They haven't. They just have not done it. The random events of Bethesda 2. Right. So it's and that's, yeah, the world of a Bethesda game. So you have those 3. Finding a skull with a diary next to it. The small little event, like I remember finding the treasure hunters outside the temple ruins that you go in and you adventure with. Finding what was the name? Froki's not Froki. The one where you get the woman who gives you, I think she gives you Zephyr, the bow Zephyr, where you find the ghost, and then you go through the dungeon, and then you end up going on a quest across all the different the dwarven ruins to find the shards that build the Ethereum Forge. Like you go into the one dungeon and there's a chest right there, and you walk up to it and you fall into a trapdoor, and then there's a necromancer that's doing experiments. And you're locked in the cage, and the key's right there outside the cage. You just literally look and you go poop, and then you get yourself out. But like, that type of stuff was so cool, and Starfield really lost a lot of that, and because they focused on what I think were the wrong things. So I hope Bethesda does bring it back, focuses on the right things, which is the world, borrowing from the right inspirations. Baldur's Gate 3, top among them. Combat from Avowed. Fallout 4 was good with that too. The storytelling through the environment leading to treasure. Yeah, Fallout 4 I didn't play as much of, but yes, I think that they did do a really good job. Fallout 4 always was a little bit different just because of the setting, and so, but was it really though? Yeah, Fallout 4 did it really well. A working bank would be cool. Huh. Yeah, I guess I don't know if I'm working to what extent, like, I mean, I don't know if it would be cool, but not to bash your bubble here, Cole, but I just, like, what would a bank add to the experience, right? I don't know. Rob it. Fair enough. Good point, Jeremy. Fair enough. Gotta get those dividends. Yeah, I was thinking strictly of investing in, like, you have a savings account with the Imperial Bank, and it's like, okay, cool, like, I could go withdraw my gold. Why would I credit score locked quests? You had the museum quest in the one city where everyone disappeared. The museum quest where everyone disappeared. Don't remember that one. Thieves Guild quest. Yeah, Pickle. Absolutely, Pickle. That's a central bank. You know what, Cole? You're right. Bank would be cool. You've convinced me. A great Thieves Guild quest. Credit score locked quest. And credit score locked quest as well. Speaking of credit scores, I have scored brilliantly by having all of you hanging out here tonight, which always makes it fun for me. But that is going to be it for tonight's show. Thank you all so much for hanging here. Eventually, I'm excited for the point where we can do just like an Elder Scroll. Like, I think genuinely that's really where I'll start to pick up my steam and my energy again. Then I'm gonna get flagged from people for being a simp and a Bethesda fangirl and a shill for Bethesda. We've been through it before. We'll go through it again. People commenting on, oh, you're just doing this because Bethesda gets you views and blah. It's like, no, I just really like Elder Scrolls. So, looking forward to that. King Siles, Cole, Chris Harris, especially. Thank you, Chris, so much for your endless generosity. It really does mean so much. Pickle Maniac, Storm Mage, Tay Talks. It was great to see you again. Arcane Realm for stopping by. That blue number. The Shadow Link. Fudge. The Elemental Hero, the Shadow Dragon Link Wolf King. No. The Elemental Hero, the Shadow Link Dragon Wolf King. That time I got it. And Jeremy also. Thank you all so much for being here. I got called those things when Starfield was coming out. It's already, it doesn't affect me. It's done with it. But there you go. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate this Thursday night with all of you. It's always a great night. And as always, if you're not following me, you can check me out on Twitter. You can follow me. Links in the description that below. Never shout that out either. Leave a like on the stream if you haven't already. Really appreciate it. And as always, I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody. Still don't have an ending screen. Didn't do that yet because I'm lazy. So, we're going to this. Please don't leave me next week. Please come back. We'll be returning at least in a week. Thank you guys, and good night.